If you're watching the news and following AGMs, especially for oil majors earlier this week, you might have seen this. Environmental activists held demonstrations during TotalEnergies' annual general meeting in Paris in order to protest against the company's environmental policies. Now, this comes as the firm faces pressure from environmental groups to withdraw from Russia entirely and end all new fossil fuel energy projects. Here's CGTN's with that report.
More than 250 green activists sought to block the annual general meeting held by French oil giant TotalEnergies in Paris. The protesters from Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth and Alternativa handcuffed themselves to each other, claiming the company is not doing enough to fight climate change.
I was there the other day at the BNP Paribas Annual General Assembly, and the same incidents took place, but it happened during the assembly. This time it is worse. They are preventing us from going into the building. And what I note, once again, is that the police don't intervene.
Today, some of the pro-climate movement came to prevent TotalEnergies General Assembly. Because no matter what they say, Total keeps on leading us into a climate dead end, with investments going mostly into fossil fuels.
TotalEnergies says it aims to cut emissions from its fuel product sales by more than 30% by the year 2030. On Wednesday, its shareholders voted in favor of the company's climate change strategy and approved a rebranding, marking the company's shift towards renewable energy. CGTN.
All right, then let's explore this in a bit more detail. Laundry Ninteretse, the Africa Regional Director, 350.org, is joining us live on the program. So, Laundry, good to see you here. Protests this week, not just at the AGM of Total. Shell also, I believe, was targeted, with activists at one point gluing themselves to chairs there. But 90% of Total shareholders approved the company's climate change strategy. Why is that strategy the wrong one, in your view?
Good evening, Ramai. Thank you for having me. I think the strategy that was adopted yesterday remained fundamentally problematic because it doesn't exclude harmful and polluting projects. This is an example. The company is still planning and pushing hard to build the East African crude oil pipeline, a pipeline that, if built, would generate up to 34 million tons of carbon dioxide annually. That represents a figure which is 6 times bigger the current emissions of a country like Uganda. And also globally, Total continue to invest heavily in fossil fuels. Oil, gas still represent 70% of its global investment. And this is a serious threat to ordinary citizens and the communities and the environment, of course. Meantime, it's presenting the company continue to engage in greenwashing strategies, creating the impression that it is shifting to renewables, but the reality is very different. And interestingly, it's important to note that 10 of its institutional shareholders clearly spoke out against that plan, showing that even internally within Total, they are dissent voice. And this is all happening at a time where UN agencies and a lot of scientific evidence are telling us that clearly there is need to stop all fossil fuel investment if we were to maintain the global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to avert further climate impact. So,
but it is all well and good to say that we should stop fossil fuel investments altogether. But then what's the alternative, and where will the money to fund those alternatives come from? If you're looking at a country like Uganda, for example, and we say, okay, we're stopping the East African pipeline completely, you're not essentially going to be tapping into the oil reserves that we're seeing in Western Uganda in the Albertine Rift, they're still going to have to import fossil fuels. It powers a big chunk of their economy. So what's the alternative for a country like Uganda?
Yeah, it's also very important to note for our viewers that even the oil that we produce in Uganda will be exported. So it's oil which won't be refined or transformed on the place, but will be exported all the way to Europe, to France, or other places where they plan to do so, and imported again in Africa. So clearly, it's not a type of investment or production which is going to benefit primarily Ugandans.
I hear what you're saying, Laundry, but just to refocus the question, right? If we say no more fossil fuels now, right, and you're looking at this entire fleet of personal cars, borders, those little small displacement motorbikes, trucks, etc., that a lot of economies, it's not just a Uganda thing, a lot of economies here in Africa rely on fossil fuels. And we're saying no more oil coming out of the ground. Then what's the alternative? Because a lot of people watching this will say, okay, it's all well and good to say, let's cut emissions, but stopping oil exploration altogether seems pretty drastic if there's no realistic, cost-effective alternative.
But again, Rama, the science is very clear. If we were to avert the catastrophic climate change that we are seeing right now on the African continent elsewhere, there is a need to stop and transition. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not that tomorrow there won't be any new production of oil. Definitely it's needed for our economies, for our infrastructure and our movement. But again, if we look at the future and the long term, in Africa and elsewhere, there have to be a very clear, urgent shift toward a transition which can allow us and lead us to a place where we have a type of energies that can sustain, that are sustainable, that are not contradicting and adding more emissions to our planet, to our ecosystem, especially for countries like Africa, which is already severely hit by a number of impact that we are seeing in the Horn of Africa, in the Sahel region, and elsewhere. So it's not that it's a production which is going to end tomorrow, but there have to be clear measures and pathway and implementation plans showing how that drastic and urgent measures have to be taken in order to maintain a type of planet which is viable, not only for us, but also for future generations.
Right, so we're also seeing a lot more attention being directed to natural gas projects, however, here in Africa, from Mozambique, where Total, of course, is due to resume its offshore gas project, one of the largest private sector investments on the continent, to Senegal. The German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, is there trying to essentially explore investments in gas projects. Given what we've discussed, is 350.org's position still that there should be no more investments in any fossil fuel projects on the continent?
Absolutely. Again, it's not 350, it's already the science that has shown that if we are to prevent further catastrophic climate impact, there should be no new fossil fuel built. And the ones actually that exist have also to be phased out. And Rama, our continent is blessed with abundant sources of renewable energy. I would be very interested to hear the Vice Chancellor, the Chancellor of Germany, or Total, pushing more towards investment in such sector, because this is the one which not only can
But that's the crux of the matter, isn't it, though? Because you have a situation here where, yes, we say we've got all these lovely natural resources available, plenty of solar available, 12 hours a day. You've got projects like Grand Inga, which are fantastic on paper, 30 gigawatts of hydro potential electricity coming out of there. But it always comes back down to the money. If South Africa is struggling to get $250 billion for its transition away from coal, I mean, what chance do the rest of the economy stand to be able to fund these renewable energy projects?
There is also a question of responsibility, especially from the countries that have benefited for so long from this type of investment, to support African economies at the moment trying to transform themselves and transition to a pathway which is just, which is fair, and which is sustainable. So again, it comes to the point of getting enough support, enough resources. And that's why I think the African continent have to raise louder its voice and advocate for the investment, not in fossil fuels, but in the type of investment that can ensure safety of its population and also resources. Because the majority of this investment, at the end of the day, don't necessarily benefit the local economies or the local population. The vast majority of this profit go back to the mother companies and foreign companies. And again, this is happening at the expenses of the population and also exacerbating further the crisis that we're already in. So that's why we're saying, let's look at the solutions that work. Let's not continue to fall in the trap of addiction to fossil fuel, because that will be a continuation of extractivism and neocolonialism. I think this has to come to the end. That's why you've seen, this week where we celebrate Africa Day, protests happening not only in Kenya, but also in Uganda, in DRC, and South Africa, elsewhere, for people to claim and advocate for a right transition which can be sustainable for our planet.
All right, Londrin Interesse from the 350.org organization. Thank you very much.